and welcome to this segment of Arts Talk. I'm Sherri Burr, and my co-host for this segment is James Burns. Welcome, James. Yes, and our special guest is Chris Eboch, who has written 9 books, has 3 under contract, and she's a very interesting person. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's, I have this whole slew of books right here that you've written and published. So let's have James ask the first question.
Well, one of the first questions is we see a great variety here in the books that you've written. Kind of explain to us how you got into the work for hire and how this sort of has led to such great topics and
I studied photography first in college and learned that I didn't want to be a photographer, but I started writing for the school paper, and that got me interested in more journalistic writing. So I went back to grad school with thinking that I was going to get into magazine writing. And I did work for a couple of magazines. So the journalistic background and working for Beauty Fashion, which is a cosmetic industry magazine where I was writing about face cream, and then the Musicians Union Journal where I was writing about union business and music and so forth. That training was very good for being able to take any topic and do the research and produce copy about it. So when I decided I wanted to write a novel, mainly for fun, for something to do on the side, that became The Well of Sacrifice. Historical fiction set in Mayan Guatemala. I had spent a summer in Mexico and Central America and really got interested in the Mayan culture. So that became that book and sold, which is kind of surprising for a first novel to sell.
Yeah, but you had a long background in it. You have a history of meeting deadlines, of getting things done, right? So that should have helped, I would think.
Right, and then the work for hire came about with all these other books is that I discovered I couldn't sell all of my novels, but I wanted to be a professional writer. That's what I wanted to do full time. So I started looking into the work for hire, which means something like this, where they have a series.
This is Life Among the Maya? Okay.
The Way People Live is a series, and there's a bunch of titles in those, and so I applied for work with this company, and they had me do a sample chapter and outline for Turkey was the first book for them.
Oh, Turkey was the first one, okay.
And basically they have a list of countries. They've done books on a bunch of countries. They have some that they're looking to have books on now, and I got to choose which of those countries I felt the most comfortable writing about. And I had lived in Saudi Arabia as a child, so with that kind of Middle Eastern background, I felt I could tackle Turkey, and I had visited there a couple of years prior.
And what is the audience for a book like this?
Those are probably junior high, high school, library, more reference. If you were writing a paper on Turkey, you might turn to a book like that.
And how do you do the research, Chris?
For these, it was primarily library research, making use of the Zimmerman Library here at UNM for the kind of books that wouldn't necessarily be as mainstream. It is a lot of quotes from other books in there. So trying to find real reliable sources for people who live there, work there, and so forth. And the Turkey and Yemen cover the history, geography, culture, problems that the countries are facing now and so forth.
And I note that you have notes and a bibliography in the back, so that's all required as part of the series.
That's part of the package that they expect, and so it's just the books that I use and become part of the bibliography. Websites and so forth.
Yeah, and Yemen, it's a country that's often in the news lately. And why did you pick this country to write on?
Again, just because I had some background in the Middle East. Having written the first one, the Turkey book, took a lot of time for the amount of money that it paid. And so one of the decisions you have to make if you're trying to do this professionally is how much time can I afford to put into this for what they're paying me? And Yemen is in some ways a relatively simple country in that it's physically small. It has a fairly uniform culture compared to some place like, I think Indonesia was one of the countries that was available, and a quick look at that said 200 different ethnic groups and just things that would have involved a lot more research to try to organize that.
Maybe you could explain a little bit more about the process of work for hire. Do you approach the companies, or is there some way that you're put into contact with those companies?
I approached it for the ones we just looked at, the Turkey, Yemen, and Life Among the Maya. I sent them a resume and writing samples, and about 2 years later, they contacted me and asked me to do a sample chapter for that particular series. And that got that work.
So you're just confirming what one of our prior guests, Elsie Kreischer, said, was that sometimes it takes about 2 years for the editor to contact you.
Yes, it can take a long time. The science books, I actually met a book packager, and a book packager is kind of a middleman. So he contacted the publisher. They wanted a 6-book series on science concepts for second grade level, and he found the writers and the illustrators and basically put the books together. And I did 2 books in that series, and then other authors did the other 4.
Oh, good. Interesting. Let's ask the audience if they have any questions for Chris. Yes, go ahead, Ryan.
What do you most like writing about? Do you enjoy your novels, or do you enjoy more of the technical books that you write?
I prefer writing novels. It's fun to start with your own ideas and do whatever you want with them. And like the Well of Sacrifice is still very close to my heart because it's not only my first book, but it was my idea from start to finish. It also pays royalties, so I get a nice check every year still. After 8 years after it came out, whereas most of the work for hire was flat fee. So once they pay you that check up front, you don't see anything more of it. But work for hire not only does it pay the bills in the short term, but it can actually lead to other work. So through networking at conferences and so forth, I got involved with the company that did this Jesse Owens book. Also work for hire, although this one does pay royalties.
Oh, that's good.
And
so this had an advance, or?
It had an advance and then pays royalties, and I have some rights if it gets made into a movie or whatever. It had the full contract.
Good.
And again, it was the kind of thing where they have a list of people that they want to have biographies coming out of, and this was one of the choices.
Oh, okay. And you chose Jesse
And
Owens.
I chose Jesse Owens or Elvis were the 2 that they had available, and so I wrote the Jesse Owens, and then I have another one on Milton Hershey, who founded Hershey's Chocolate.
Oh,
and that'll be
nice.
out this summer.
Nice.
But after working with that company, I sent them a proposal for an original series. Would be direct paperback, but it's my idea, and I would be writing all the books, and that's the regular contract with royalties and so forth, and that has been accepted.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And I think in that case, I knew the editor. I'd met him at conferences and so forth. He knew my work for the work for hire, and he called me a month after I mailed him the manuscript.
Wow.
And said on the phone, I love it, I want to buy it. It needs to be twice as long. But I think in that case, that it didn't take 2 years because I already had that contact. I already had the in with the company, and they trusted that I would be able to pull off the work.
Right. So you're showing how publishing is very much a relationship business.
I think networking does help. You can certainly just send your manuscript in blind to a publisher, and things do get bought that way if you do your homework and research what the best publisher is. But making connections at conferences and so forth, that's a big help.
Okay. Other questions for the audience?
Yeah, you write about all different topics to all different audiences. How much do you have to kind of really step back and say, hold on, I'm supposed to be writing this for a second grader, and I just pulled out a 5-syllable word. Is that a challenge for you?
It definitely is something that you have to keep in mind, that the audience age you're writing for the science books, to deal with science concepts at such a young level. You have to really, I did some research looking at books that say like what your second grader needs to know. And it discusses what they learn in school at that age. And so that gave me an idea of the concepts that I could cover. And then my journalism background has actually been helpful because you write at 6th to 8th grade level if you're writing for magazines or newspapers. And that's kind of my natural voice as well. I don't have to pull that back that much. I like clear communication, not fancy words. So there is some adjustment between the second grade and the junior high and so forth, but you can read other books that are similar, or in this series, the Jesse Owens series, read their other biographies and get a feel for the voice and the flavor.
Well, thank you, Chris, for joining us. And thank you, James Burns, for co-hosting. And thank you, the audience, for joining us for this segment of Arts Talk with Chris Eboch and James Burns.